This is The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic. In 2018, I ran a 2:58 marathon while making a major mistake. I thought I was doing everything right, and clearly the results are something I am still bragging about today. But there was one major flaw in my race strategy that could have made it even better, and I had no idea at the time. I ran a sub-3 marathon, only fueling with 30 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That was a completely normal intake given the coaching wisdom at the time. But for perspective, elite runners today are taking in at least 3 times that. Now, I am not at all saying that less fuel makes my race more impressive. In fact, it's the opposite. I will forever wonder what I left on the table had I had the benefit of the science today. We now know a lot more about carbohydrate absorption, multiple transport pathways, and gut training than ever before. And it's backed by real-world athletes who are pushing the boundaries even more. So what has changed in the last decade or so when it comes to endurance fueling guidelines? Let's find out. Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and my mission is to help you improve your running, your mindset, and your life with science-backed training and plant-based nutrition. Today, I'm going into the new science of endurance fueling. You'll learn what has changed about fueling guidelines and why, how training your gut is essential for this to actually work, and how you can make the perfect fuel at home. This is going to get into the science quite a bit, and if you're into that, you're the perfect candidate for the PR team. You have found your tribe. Everyone on the PR team gets a custom running schedule created by me, including all your strength, mobility, mental strength, and more. No more decision fatigue on what you should do today. It's all laid out for you perfectly in the app, which will sync to your running watch. You'll be joining a team of runners just like you, all ages, all paces. We're all doing the same thing, and we're cheering each other on. It really is the best way to stay accountable and true to your goals while also getting a built-in group of new running buddies. I'll talk more about the team later on in the show, but if you are ready to learn more right now, head to theplantedrunner.com/group. Don't forget to stay tuned all the way to the end of the episode for this week's Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. I know this is a show about running, but I've got to say that when you want to look at the most advanced science in endurance sport, don't look at the runners. Start with the cyclists. Why? Well, it's simple. Money. There's just a lot more of it in cycling to fund the science, so the bikers tend to be ahead of the curve. Records that once seemed untouchable in cycling are falling again and again. Tadej Pogačar, the greatest cycler who has ever raced, is crushing records that doped-up athletes like Lance Armstrong have held for years. It seems as if the entire endurance world suddenly got faster overnight. Are they just getting better at doping? I'll leave that out there as TBD, but there is one major, perfectly legal shift: the way elite endurance athletes are fueling. Across cycling, ultra running, and long distance running, we are seeing a move towards dramatically higher carbohydrate intake during training and racing. Not just slightly higher, but amounts that until recently were considered impossible. And it's not just the cyclists. Marathoners and ultra runners like Kilian Jornet have openly discussed fueling at rates up to 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour during demanding efforts. Numbers like that would have sounded absurd 5 or 10 years ago. To put this in perspective, a standard can of soda contains about 35 to 40 grams of sugar. Those athletes are consuming the equivalent of 3 cans worth of sugar every single hour while racing uphill at high heart rates and under extreme physiological stress. And what's remarkable is not just that they can tolerate it, but the performance data clearly shows a benefit from doing so. For a long time, while I was racing, endurance fueling guidelines recommended 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour for events lasting longer than about 2 hours. That number wasn't chosen because more carbs wouldn't help performance. It was chosen because early research suggested that the gut simply couldn't absorb more than that amount. When athletes tried to push beyond it, the result was usually gastrointestinal distress, bloating, cramping, and ruined races. So we assumed 60 grams per hour was the upper limit. The breakthrough came when researchers discovered that carbohydrate absorption in the gut isn't limited to a single pathway. Glucose and fructose are absorbed through different intestinal transporters. Glucose uses one set of transport mechanisms, fructose uses another. When you combine them, you effectively open multiple doors for carbohydrate to move from the gut into the bloodstream. This has changed everything. One of the early landmark studies tested this directly by comparing athletes fueling with glucose alone versus a glucose-fructose combination. Not only were the athletes able to absorb and oxidize more carbohydrate when they were both used together, they actually performed better, riding faster in time trials compared to glucose alone. Now, there is a specific ratio of glucose to fructose that's ideal, and I'll get into that a little later on. The discovery of combining carb types has since been replicated across many studies. So now it's the standard recommendation of up to 90 grams of carb per hour for long endurance events. More recently, the research has pushed this even further. New lab studies have shown that when athletes use mixed carbohydrates and train their gut to tolerate it, intake can increase to 120 grams per hour or more. In controlled trials, athletes fueling at these higher levels showed significantly higher exogenous carbohydrate oxidation. That's a fancy way of saying more of the carbs they consumed were actually being used as fuel by the muscles rather than sitting unused in the gut. More importantly, this isn't just lab data. In real-world race studies, runners consuming higher carbohydrate amounts showed less muscle damage and lowered internal training load compared to those taking in lower amounts. In other words, the more they fueled, the better their bodies held up during the effort and afterward. Similar findings have been shown in cyclists where higher carb intake preserved neuromuscular function and improved next-day high-intensity capacity. The takeaway from this body of evidence is clear. The more carbohydrate an athlete can tolerate and absorb during endurance exercise, the more fuel the muscles receive, the better performance becomes, and the faster recovery follows. But there's an important catch. You can't jump straight from 30 grams per hour to 120 grams per hour and expect it to go well. This is where gut training comes in. I'll go over that when we come back. I want to tell you about a unique opportunity for you to get stronger, faster, and stay motivated to hit your running and nutrition goals this year. And that is to join the PR team. Each member of the team gets a custom training plan made by me for you based on your unique fitness goals and lifestyle. Everything you need to achieve your running dreams is included, such as strength training, recovery, and even cross-training if you want it. I include weekly mental strength training as well as training tips and nutrition guides. But here's where it gets really cool. The group has its own page in the app where we share workouts, ask training questions, and get feedback from me and the other teammates. And each week, I create an exclusive private podcast just for the team based on the questions I get and what I see in their training each week. And I usually end up sharing behind the scenes and exclusive sneak peeks with the team that I don't share anywhere else. So instead of joining a Facebook group or sitting through another Zoom call, you get to listen to tailored advice on the run, and you don't have to do this all alone. When you're ready to take your running to the next level and join an amazing team of runners, head to theplantedrunner.com/group and join us today. It's more affordable than you think, and I can't wait to have you. The Planted Runner is sponsored by Liquid IV. Story time. When I first started running, I just went out and ran until I had to stop. Then I walked home. No fueling, no hydration, no plan at all. It actually kind of worked, but I was out there a long time until I finally figured out there's a better way to train. And it turns out there's a better way to hydrate than just water. Rehydrate with Liquid IV's Energy Multiplier, sugar-free hydrating energy. It's scientifically formulated to support physical energy, hydration, focus, mood, and social stamina, so it's perfect when you need a little boost on the run. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Powered by Live Hydroscience an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. Rehydrate better with better hydration and energy from Liquid IV, zero sugar and zero crash. Tear, pour, live more. Go to liquidiv.com and get 20% off your first order with code PLANTED at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code PLANTED at liquidiv.com. Welcome back to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic. Just like muscles adapt to training stress, the digestive system adapts to repeated exposure to carbohydrate intake during exercise. Research shows that when athletes regularly practice fueling during workouts, the body increases the number and the activity of carbohydrate transporters in the gut. These transporters are like little doorways that allow glucose and fructose into the bloodstream. When you practice gut training more often, your body responds by adding more doorways. This allows that fuel to move out of the gut faster with greater absorption capacity and fewer GI symptoms. Studies consistently show that athletes who train their gut not only report fewer GI issues, but can tolerate much higher fueling rates during races. And that translates directly into more available energy when it matters most. So what's the magic ratio of glucose to fructose? Most of the classic endurance research said a 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio was the sweet spot. That's the ratio used in many of the early multiple transportable carbohydrate studies and is still common in commercial sports nutrition products. But more recent work suggests that 1-to-1 ratios may further increase oxidation at very high intakes, 90 to 120 grams per hour, particularly in elite athletes who have trained their gut extensively. But those higher fructose loads also increase GI risks for many runners. In other words, 2-to-1 is a very safe, evidence-based starting point. 1-to-1 is a bit more aggressive and probably not for beginners. Which brings us to the obvious question runners ask once they hear this. Wait a second, what is the ratio of table sugar? Conveniently, cheap, common table sugar, also known as sucrose, is 1-to-1. That means that you have the most advanced, elite fuel sitting in your pantry right now. When you digest sucrose, it's split into one glucose molecule and one fructose molecule, meaning it automatically uses both transport pathways. From a transport and oxidation standpoint, sucrose absolutely qualifies as a multiple transportable carbohydrate source. And studies have shown that sucrose can support high oxidation rates similar to commercial glucose fructose blends. Now, when my son, who is an endurance cyclist, heard this, he promptly began to make his own gels made of simple syrup. What can I say? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? The only caveat here is actually similar to commercial gels as well. If you ingest a highly concentrated carb source, it won't matter if it's the perfect ratio if it's too thick to move through to your intestines. You'll need to drink enough water to dilute it so the fluid actually moves into the bloodstream instead of sitting in the gut. Sodium is also a factor in absorption and dehydration, which commercial products are hopefully taking into account, so you'll need to factor that in if you decide to DIY it. Whether you choose to buy fuel or make it yourself, many runners still struggle with the idea of taking in so much sugar for your runs. There's a lingering belief that fueling during training somehow reduces adaptation, that running low or fasted training builds toughness or some kind of metabolic advantage. But the evidence doesn't support this, and in fact, it is the opposite. Fueling during longer hard workouts enables higher intensity, better quality sessions, faster recovery, and the ability to train well again sooner. Over weeks and months, that compounds into better fitness and better performance. And again, when you fuel, you are building more and more of those carbohydrate doorways to get the fuel out of your gut and into the muscles. Another common mistake is only practicing fueling during slow long runs. Race pace fueling is a skill, and the gut needs to be trained under the same intensity conditions that you'll face on race day. If you never practice fueling while running hard, you're asking your digestive system to perform an untrained task when it matters most. It's also worth addressing the concern that naturally comes up at this point. We all know that eating large amounts of sugar at rest really isn't good for long-term health. But endurance training changes the context entirely. During prolonged exercise, the muscles are actively pulling glucose from the bloodstream and oxidizing it or using it for energy. Well-trained endurance athletes tend to have a high insulin sensitivity and a strong capacity to dispose of carbohydrate efficiently. In this context, carbohydrate intake is being used immediately to meet energy demand, not stored as excess. That doesn't mean that everyone needs to fuel every run aggressively. Most easy runs can and should be done with little or no fueling during the activity. Not fasted training, of course. Please eat breakfast, but you are not going to need to pack a bunch of gels for a 30-minute jog. The real benefit of high-carb fueling shows up in athletes who train a lot and during key sessions, long runs, hard workouts, and races where performance, recovery, and durability matter. So, what does this look like for you and your endurance training? Start with moderate fueling, which is 40 to 60 grams per hour for any run longer than an hour. Practice consistently during long or hard sessions. Gradually increase your intake over time, allowing the gut to adapt. Use carbohydrate sources that combine glucose and fructose, whether that's commercial products or simple homemade solutions. What matters is the carbohydrate mix, the total intake, practicing it under realistic conditions, and, importantly, if you can handle the taste. High carbohydrate fueling is one of the biggest breakthroughs in modern endurance sports. To truly get the best out of your performance and your recovery, practice this in training, just like you train your legs. And now it's time for this week's Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. Today's topic is belief is more powerful than truth. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. The mind loves to believe whatever you tell it, so be careful with what you repeat to yourself when you are running. This is not about being falsely positive, but it's about catching those negative thoughts and reframing them. If you say, I can't run any faster, or even, I'm doing my best, both of those thoughts will limit you. Instead, shift to, this is temporary, or I've got more in me, or I can handle this, or simply, yes, I can. Your brain's job is to limit you from doing hard things. Your job is to believe that you can. Thank you for listening to The Planted Runner, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Don't forget that you can enter to win a free custom training plan for your next race and get featured on the show. Just write an Apple Podcast review and enter at theplantedrunner.com/PRLab. Of course, reviews are the #1 way to boost this show's reach, and it's a great way to tell me what you'd like to hear next because I read every single one. Have a great run today.